The word why. What a curious word. The kind of word that can make us cringe, feel defensive, or even distant. But you know, sometimes why is the key that can unlock so much to our lives. Join me as we explore the why with fascinating contributors to the world, those that entertain us, inform us, teach us about life, and if we're lucky, inspire the next in all of us. I'm your host, Dr. Rod Berger, and welcome to HeadRoom, a production of Rainlight and co-produced by Old Soul. Let's go. Well, as many of you who have followed, and thank you for doing so, followed my work and my travels, you know that I have had a keen interest in water, and especially water insecurity around the world, and recently being in Tanzania with the Korsa Foundation and WaterAid, sort of seeing the power of water from, the surface level that is there and that is not, and the impact that that has on societies in different parts of the world. Well, today we're going to go beneath the water, and we're going to talk to an incredibly creative individual who just love his background, and I think you're going to as well. So this sounds like a terrible transition here, but let's dive in with Joshua Sam Miller. Let me give you a little background. So he's a multidisciplinary artist, environmentalist, and ecopreneur on a mission to connect people to the natural world through immersive art. Recently, he's advocated for the importance of ocean conservation through Sounds of the Ocean, which blends the arts and sciences to connect with marine life through sound. He's also the creator of Embodied Sounds, a mindful content creation studio and music label bringing immersive wellness experiences around the world. For over 10 years, Joshua worked in documentary film production in New York City as a cinematographer and editor of short and feature-length films. Following a discovery for surfing and a growing awareness of the fragility of life underwater, Joshua felt inspired to devote his artistry towards ocean conservation while living in Northern California, and Sounds of the Ocean was born. In 2020, the project was accepted as part of the International Year of Sound and was featured by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association in Santa Cruz, California, and debuted at Burning Man 2019. In 2021, he presented his work at the United Nations Climate Conference, COP26, and was featured on PBS television, World Ocean Day, and also as an artist in residence in Berlin. In 2022, Embodied Sounds shared the premiere of Sounds of the Ocean at Wisdom LA and was welcomed as an official accredited organization at the United Nations Ocean Conference. That's an incredible bio, and there's so much more even there that I could go into, Joshua. Out of those elements, just sort of start here. What brings sort of the smile to your face when you hear those accomplishments? What's the first thing that sort of jumps off of your own bio that you say, yeah, I did that and that feels really good for a number of different reasons?
Well, thanks for having me today. And it's very rare that I get to listen to someone read that off. So it's really quite something to hear back what you have done. And I would say the thing that really sticks off the most was the opportunity that we had to share Sounds of the Ocean in California, in Santa Cruz, because that's really where the project started. And to think back to that time brings a big smile to my face because I get to kind of retrace my steps since then. And not just thinking about it as, yeah, we got to do that, which was a lot of fun and quite something to be proud of, but to think of all the people we got to meet along the way, and really the motivation, the telling stories on a global scale, and weaving in so many different cultures and different types of people into this movement has been really something I'm proud of.
Let's talk about choosing the canvas of the ocean and water for you creatively. I would imagine that there elements or there experiences when you were younger that basically sort of seeded the idea. Maybe it didn't germinate as early as you thought it might, and it waited until you were an adult. But were there certain elements and experiences with water that you've romanticized since you were a kid? There were the mystery of it. Tell me about sort of your original relationship with water and the ocean.
Well, I grew up in New York, which is coastal city, of course, but not one that people go in quite, regularly. Sometimes in the summertime, you have a nice day at the beach, but I grew up with two parents who were big scuba diving fans. And so this meant that I was also going to be a scuba diver so we could go on trips together. I don't think I really had a choice about it, but I'm happy about that decision that my folks made to just throw me in, because everything I'm doing now, I'd say, connects back to those moments in my childhood. And I actually became a certified scuba diver in a lake in New Hampshire, which is a really interesting place to learn how to scuba dive. But I think it definitely planted that seed of inspiration and showed me how all of these bodies of water are connected, of course. So I definitely didn't realize that at the time, but thinking about it now, I can see the lineage there.
And so, at what point did you start to see that there was purpose with what you were doing? When you started to say, I've been a cinematographer, I've worked, on land out of New York. And at what point did you say storytelling can have a purpose beyond potentially information? A place to dispense information and learning, and entertainment. At what point did purpose come into the equation?
Yeah, I think really the best answer to that one is coming from the perspective of music and sound. And as a musician and a composer and just a lover of music since I was even younger than those diving experiences, I think when I started to realize that connecting people with sounds of underwater life, such as whales, dolphins, and other ocean noise, brings up some very intense emotions for them as the listener, and takes them to places that we kind of can't even think about going, in our day-to-day lives. For example, the depths of the ocean being the least explored part of our planet, and somewhat less explored than many parts of outer space, which I have learned over the years, which I find fascinating. And so that opportunity of just simply holding the space to allow people to listen to what's going on in the ocean and also notice what's going on within themselves, this started to open my mind up to say, hey, this might be something here. Let's let's pursue this a bit more.
Tell me about the difference, Joshua, in capturing something visually as a cinematographer. And then, is there a rewiring of the mind creatively when you're thinking about capturing sound? Do you have a horizon line, or is it sort of endless? And does that impact the way in which you look at capturing that creative element for all of us to enjoy?
Oh, definitely, definitely. And the visual medium is an excellent one, and I think something that we have integrated well with the sounds together to make a really full experience. But having worked both in the arts as a visual creator as well as an audio uh, creator, I would say the visual, it's easy to kind of get distracted by. Uh, it's easy to kind of overlook what you're hearing, and many people don't even really think about what they're hearing on a day-to-day basis. And so I think it requires a bit of a softer approach, maybe a bit more receptive, and kind of using really these ears that we have to notice things that you otherwise might overlook because you're looking for the next thing. So I think it does require us to be a bit more present, perhaps, and paying attention, as many of my teachers have said many times. Especially when the monkey mind comes in there and wants to kind of jump us to the next thing, like, hey, pay attention.
Were there
So
assumptions, Joshua, that you made going in that you were surprised that those were your assumptions when you thought about underwater sounds and relating that to music and sort of just the relationship you had to it?
yeah, actually, one thing that I was really surprised to learn was a lot about the noise pollution that exists underwater. And being that it is World Oceans Week, it's very good to talk about this because the threats to marine life, the threats to uh, marine habitats are numerous. And most of us know about the obvious ones like plastic production, pollution, temperature, sea level rise, maybe oil and gas disasters, things like that. But on top of that, we also have this noise pollution, which is a real issue and something that I've learned a ton about over the last 5 years working in this field, which is actually more important than people think because many of these species rely on sound to communicate, to mate, to
So are
survive.
we scrambling their systems, their radar system?
We are actually. We are totally scrambling their radar and their sense of their habitat, you know. Imagine if we constantly had a sound going, for example, that we couldn't get rid of that was just so annoying to listen to. So this was something that I didn't know was such a big deal, which is something that we've tried to raise a lot of awareness about through the project. And fortunately, there are ways that we can contain some of that noise pollution by, for example, limiting where ships are allowed to sail, especially cargo ships and oil and gas exploration, Navy ships, things like that, to really keep parts of the ocean quiet for the purposes of preserving the habitat of the species that live there. And through our collaboration with scientists, namely the Monterey Bay Aquatic Research Institute, we've gotten to understand a lot about the history, especially on the Pacific coast, of how these recordings have been used to divert some of that traffic to protect parts of the sea, which I find fascinating.
So say more about that. So what do you mean by diverting the traffic?
So U.S. has a number of marine sanctuaries where ships are not allowed to pass through. And there are kind of like national parks that we have on land, areas of the ocean that have been agreed by experts from coming from the conservation side as well as politics and government to keep them free of our ships and of uh, certain activities that could threaten their habitats. Of course, this is an ongoing conversation and always one that needs updates and check-ins over the years because there's always new ways to exploit the ocean, unfortunately. Um, but this is something that has been able to protect several habitats just by putting these recordings in front of policymakers and decision makers and allowing them to understand what's going on in the ocean.
I wonder if there is it's sort of a double-edged sword here, right? So there's such excitement and mystery about the ocean, right? It's just this wonderful sort of canvas for storytelling, for voyage, right? Exploration, but yet there's so much to your point that we don't know. And the fact that you said earlier, and I hope people heard that, that there are, I guess, those that there's the notion that we've been studying space more than we have our own
Mhm.
oceans. I'm wondering if this is how much of this is an educational issue. That if we knew more about what is beneath the water, we would potentially care more. Hopefully, we would potentially practice sort of a safe, neighborhood or neighborly ways, understanding that the ocean is vital to our existence. How much of the mystery is actually sort of a double-edged sword in your with your perspective in keeping us from understanding the true impact the oceans have on our lives?
I think it's absolutely an educational issue. And one thing that we are really hoping that our project will contribute to is this movement of mindful activists who are not looking to create trouble and protest and create about a lot more noise in the conversation, but who want to take action and really do something either on a small scale in their own daily lives or on a large scale at a institutional or governmental level to really reduce our pollution and our impact on the seas. Um, Last year was a real highlight year in the history of the ocean because finally we have a treaty now that protects much more of the ocean than we certainly had before. And so we are in the ocean decade. 2020 to 2030 has been deemed by United Nations as the decade to prioritize the ocean and put the ocean first. And as a official UN Ocean Decade activity, we've really gotten to understand that globally speaking, not just in one country, but globally speaking, this resource is starting to become more uh, realized as an asset for us to maintain life as we know it on this planet. And one of our best defenses against climate change, quite honestly. It's clear now that the ocean is the best regulator that we have against global warming, and keeping the ocean happy, so to speak, of course, many ways that that can be determined, is essential for the development of our species. And as one of my inspirational mentor says, Dr. Sylvia Earle, no blue, no green.
No blue, no green. I like that.
I like that one too. I have to reference Sylvia on World Oceans Week.
How do you think of yourself now? Is it easy to put yourself in one box and have one label? Are you a creator? Are you an activist? Where do you sort of land, and what seat at whatever table do you put yourself?
Yeah, that's a tough one for me. I think about 10 years ago, I came across the term on YouTube, multi-potentialite. Have you ever heard that?
No, no,
Have you
but I
ever
have
heard that
now.
one? um, I would say I'm a multi-potentialite. That's totally me. I've always been very much an out of the box type of person, and um, worn many hats. Feel like that's essential these days more than ever, and I like it. So I often shift gears depending on the needs of the situation.
And so do you think of yourself then as a composer? I mean, it sounds like, as you said, that it's almost like putting a symphony together. It's understanding
Yes.
when and where and how and at what sort of, the power of what you're putting forth in that given moment, and how that then impacts the rest of the instruments and the orchestra at large.
Definitely, yes. Composer is one of the many hats that I do wear, and I'd say that my creative approach with music is it's very intuitive. It's very much based on the quality of the sound itself, and not so much theory based. For example, excuse me. So seeing the parallels and the similarities between creating a symphony on a sheet of paper or in an orchestra compared to running a business or having a life in the creative arts or cleaning up the ocean, you can start to see a lot of similarities between music, sound, and life itself, which might sound a little bit esoteric, but it makes sense to me. And I think that uh, the overlap of how I've been able to learn so much as a musician has only supported me in other areas of life.
Did you ever think that it would get to this point where you are a part of, United Nations activities, that you are being recognized globally? I mean, I get the sense from you as a multi-potentialite that you were that this was just sort of the next phase of your life in what you were doing, and it wasn't that you were going for any acknowledgement or recognition. It just was the next chapter in your creative journey. Is that fair?
Yes, I would say so. I would agree. It was a huge surprise to um, connect with the United Nations. I'm trying to remember exactly how that came to be, but it really did just happen very organically. And we hosted our first concert of Sounds of the Ocean in Santa Cruz back in 2019 before the pandemic, which obviously put a bit of a damper on things for a little while. And during that time, I left the US, went to Costa Rica, and really started to share this sound experience in places like yoga studios, beach concerts, retreat centers, and people just kept showing up. So we kept doing it. And then we had more people show up, and so many people contributed wonderful, wonderful ideas. It's important to acknowledge that while I might be the most public face of the project, we have an enormous team of extremely talented artists and activists who have helped get it this far. And one thing led to another, and here we are. I think it's definitely something that was not planned on my side for too long. Maybe there was another plan somewhere, but who knows?
HeadRoom is produced by Old Soul, a one-stop marketing agency that understands the power of brand and nuance. Reach out to my guy Matt at Old Soul and supercharge your brand and content strategy. That's Old Soul. Shoot Matt a note at aoldsoul.com. That's AOLDSOUL.com. And now, back to our guest. No, I love that. And I know people can't see because this is obviously a podcast, but just the humility, that you approach that response with, and the acknowledgement of those that work with you to not only keep this going, but to grow it. Let's talk about education in the next generation. So there's this big push around social entrepreneurism, but I love this ecopreneur designation. What's in your estimation? How are we doing in helping to, I guess, I don't know, generate some excitement that the mysteries of the deep, that there are there's so many things to explore that we haven't yet, and we can't say that about a lot, right? I mean, we've identified this is not a few hundred years ago where we're still wondering what's out there, and plotting longitude and latitude, and so the mystery of the deep is there, and it feels like it's something we could use to inspire young people to get behind, especially if they're already looking at ways in which to support the planet through social entrepreneurism.
Definitely, definitely. At the last climate conference that we were lucky enough to attend in Dubai, I was invited on board one of the most advanced research vessels that exist today to explore the ocean, which is led by a company called Oceanic. And the current leader of that company um, said quite profoundly, "We're here to make science cool again." And I just loved that statement because that's really what we need to do to get the next generation to care about all of this. And I think we're taking a similar approach in a less scientific way. Of course, we are, I'd say, more of an arts project and something that um, kids can experience and then have a lesson afterwards about maybe what they heard and the science behind it. Because my approach and my contribution, I think, to the conservation movement has really been from the artistic background, and accepting that we have a lot of intellectual thought leaders and experts and white papers already published. And many people know actually a lot already about what's going on, what we need to do to, maybe stop some of the problems that are existing and preserve what's there. But we're not doing it. And globally, we're not doing it. So my team asked ourselves, well, what can we offer as artists, as creatives, to help people connect on an emotional level to the science, to the conservation topics, and feel better at the same time? Because I'm a big believer that when we as human beings are feeling good, we have more space in our daily lives and in our minds to think about what we can do to protect the planet, for example, or help out our friends or our community. But when we are stressed and we're struggling with something, can be anything, whether you don't have enough food or water or relationship stress or work stress, financial stress, all you can think about is yourself and fixing the problem. So we kind of created this whole experience to help people feel less of all of those things, less stress mostly. We focus a lot on mental health. so that while they're having our, immersive experience and while they're present with us, whether it's a short version or a long version, there's space to think about what can I be doing to help the ocean? What can I be doing to save, the whales? And we find that this emotional approach has a lot of effect on people's choice of how they consume, how they live, I'd say, on a day-to-day basis. And there's a lot of psychological research on that subject, across many industries. So we're trying to bring that approach to, I'd say, the topic of ocean conservation and speak less to people's uh, frontal cortex of the brain and more to the emotional center, of the body. And this is quite a fun approach because it really works for so many different ages.
It no, it does. I mean, that connecting to the emotional side of it and what it means. I'm wondering, do you find that there's a challenge? I've experienced this, and I'll say whether it's conservation movement or NGOs, just sort of broadly speaking, that there's a challenge in trying to be all things for all people.
Hmm.
And there's also a sort of wedded approach that if I am about water, then that's all that I'm about. If I'm all about social services, that's all that I'm about. And I can't stray from that. And so I'm just going to lean all the way in.
Mm.
This sort of push pull challenge that folks and organizations have. Do you experience that, or do you have a really unique seat at the table where people understand the artistry and the role that you play in opening up dialogue or creating an environment where dialogue can really, I guess, come from a healthy place that is generative, that maybe you're not moderating per se, but you're creating the conditions so that those things can happen?
That's a great question. I would say it's probably a bit of both. I have noticed, especially attending a lot of conferences as an artist, as a musician, I am definitely the minority. I would say most people there are coming with much different backgrounds, a lot more higher education focus, for example, and a real studied uh, intellectual community. And I love to philosophize. I love to think and speak on these topics. But as an artist, I would say we are definitely in a different category, I'd say, of just the type of person that we are, um, which maybe is not that big of a deal. But I do get asked all the time, what's next? Is it sounds of the jungle or of the desert and different biospheres and places like that? And we'll see what happens in the future, but it has been very, very useful to focus on one subject for the last couple of years and go deep with it because it's a lifelong, I'd say, path of exploration and study and understanding to discover what really is affecting the health of the ocean. And as someone who grew up a diver and now a surfer and just lover of the sea in general, I find that more than enough material to work with. It doesn't feel contained.
No, and what I love about that is I think it creates an incredible opening, a door without a lock for young people, because I think we struggle. We have for generations, I'll speak for my generation, where it's that you think you have to have one skill that ports over to one job or one career or area of focus. And I love that this sort of opens this door, again, with no lock, for them to think about ways in which they can participate in a conservation movement, or any
Yes.
manner of helping planet Earth, that it may not be that it's science based, because that may not be the way in which they think. It's just not natural to them, but they know they can have a hand in improving the oceans, or whatever biosphere of interest they have. What kind of sense of responsibility do you have in representing the artist community? And is that the community that you, I guess, would, if you had to hold up sort of hold a baton, it's that? And do you feel a sense of responsibility?
I would say it inspires me to really pass on this approach of creating art with a conservation message attached to the next generation, and to be an example of that for younger musicians specifically, because one thing that can happen as a creative person is you kind of start to just think a lot about your own story and experience, because you're then having to show up and create something original, so you base it on your own experience. um, but I have found that when you can connect that to a much larger message, a much um, you could say more global or community based approach, the art takes on a new meaning all of its own, which includes your voice, of course, and your experience, but it's not so much about you. And so teaching that to younger artists is something I'm very interested in over the years to come, because gosh, I mean, imagine what especially kids these days, with so much technology available and so much information available, that I certainly didn't have and my parents didn't have, even less of, growing up, can do with all of that from a creative lens, and just see what comes out with that kind of framing to give them some direction. So I guess I do feel a sense of responsibility now to kind of try and pass that on, because it's just so rewarding for everyone.
Yeah, and it reminded me earlier this year, I interviewed astronaut John Schaffner, who went up with SpaceX, and he integrated in art, where he would take art that young people made in sort of their perception of what space is, and I would really put you and John at the same
Mm.
table. You were exploring different biospheres and trying to capture different elements that really sort of they tie into the human experience. Ultimately, is what it is. And that's
Thank
what I
you.
think is so compelling for people.
Oh, thank you. It's a huge honor, and something that I'll definitely have to check out his work now that you mention him. We've been working in the last 2 years mostly in planetariums, which historically have been spaces to look at space. And it's remarkable how similar the two environments are, actually. Both, the furthest parts of the universe and the deepest depths of the sea, they both have this mystery about them, which is somewhat, intoxicating for us to think about, because we just don't really know what's there. And working now in the planetarium space, I have really enjoyed getting to be a bridge between these two environments, and to bring a new subject into an existing industry that has been around for the last 50 or 100 years, depending, where in the world you are, and talk about something new.
What's the
And
response from the audience in a planetarium?
most of the time it is wonderful. you know we we occasionally have a few people who are kind of confused, I think, but on the whole, people just love it. We've been very lucky to get a warm reception here in Germany, and actually just finished our spring tour with 14 sold out shows.
Wow.
So I think that speaks for itself. And when I see the faces on the audience standing up and playing the music, people just look so happy, so relaxed, kind of just in a different mindset altogether. It's hard to describe, but I think it's working as we hope it should.
Joshua, let's pivot. Let's talk technically. How do you capture the sounds?
Great question. I mentioned earlier that one of our partners is from Monterey Bay, California, and we were lucky to receive an incredible sound library from their research station, which is 1,000 meters, almost 3,000 feet underwater, and I think about 20 miles offshore. So it's incredible place to listen in a natural amphitheater, in a canyon underwater. So when I first started working with those sound samples, which mostly consist of humpback whales, blue whales, dolphins, and some ocean sound, we started to create music that became a conversation with these animals. And I tried to keep the musical score very simple to really support what these creatures have to say. And so I limited myself to one instrument with one animal. And that became a bit of a creative framing to produce the musical composition. And here we are 5 years later with a few improvements since then, but more or less a very similar arc to that first initial composition.
So you're saying you would play it. So help me understand that part of it. So you'd capture it. You're under. I'm thinking of it's like the Hollywood Bowl underneath the water or something,
Yeah, exactly. Like
or
Red
Red Rock
Rocks.
or so. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Underwater, an underwater Red Rocks amphitheater.
And so
It's
you're
called,
capturing that sound, and then when you're putting the score together, your basic tenet is one instrument, one marine. Like, right? Is that what we're like? One whale to one instrument.
yeah, exactly. As a solo musician, I really wanted to have that personal connection to each of my bandmates, you could say, and
Do you think that makes it
support.
more accessible for the audience because it makes it more of a, not that they would be aware of it, but there's this one to one that it almost transfers to them? Because I've listened to your work and I selfishly love it because when I do writing, I'll listen to something like what you have and I'll just put it on repeat and I'll listen to it for hours because
Oh,
for
thank
whatever
you.
reason it feels like it's a little bit like the Calm app or these sorts of EMDR things that allow your brain to sort of open up. It's like, it's like pouring a bottle of wine into a decanter. You're letting it breathe, right? You're letting it breathe under the ocean.
Definitely, that's a great description.
And so I don't want to ask the what's next, but when now that you have what I mean, maybe a firm grasp is too definitive, but you have a healthy understanding for the ecosystem that you're playing in.
Mm.
Does it push the bounds of your creativity to think in ways that you hadn't previously? Because maybe initially you just didn't want to, in essence, disturb the environment you were going into, and you also wanted to respect it without sort of this creative license that was editorializing in a way that it was not authentic. So now you have your bearings. Does it make you, when you sort of lay down at night, explore even deeper?
Oh, definitely, definitely. One thing that's been really exciting with this project is just how many different formats and settings one can experience a show or a musical journey. And of course, we do our live performances, which are either going to be in more planetariums or performing arts centers, spaces that are designed for live entertainment. We've released our feature film for those venues as well, which is now starting to come out. This week's actually a huge week for us to be doing a global film screening campaign where I believe it's 15 countries will be screening Sounds of the Ocean over the next 10 days. And
Wow.
we are so excited about this. It was our big project for the Ocean Day program this year to raise awareness, also raise some funds. And each venue will be donating proceeds of their screening profits to local ocean and water conservation projects and helping build out a grassroots global movement to put the ocean first, which this is something I'm quite proud of that we were able to put together, which my co-director and also wife, Elisa Line, was a key component of. So I have to give her credit for helping think that one through.
As a creative partner and a smart husband.
Thank you. Um, and gosh, the other thing is really going deeper with the sound subject itself and allowing for more people to listen to both the ocean sound journey as well as our music, perhaps when they're in water themselves with underwater sound technology. And this is a format that we're really excited to be developing and bring to more places and more people to help, help bring awareness to the cause.
What's the moral of your story? And not just in a classical sense, but when you think about the arc of being a young boy who was obviously creative and you were finding different ways to express that creativity. Are you more boy-like, childlike now because you have achieved, and I don't mean it as sort of a materialistic sort of sense at all. It's just that when you have some recognition, it allows you to then take down every barrier, every perceived barrier, and really just be and create. So, would you say you're more childlike now, even now as an adult, because of the freedom, the untethered nature of your work?
Definitely. Yeah. I've always been a big dreamer, I'd say, and love to travel, love that feeling of freedom that comes from, uh, going on an adventure. And music is really a lifelong journey. It's full of many surprises and twists and bends around the corner. Some not so great, some are incredible. And now that I've really gotten to express myself as a musician and bring that practice into my life on a regular basis, I have a lot of joy thinking about where it can take me next. So it's quite, yeah, we're quite lucky actually to be doing this, and we just want, you know, people to feel healthier in their own lives and also care about the planet. That's, I'd say, as simple as I can say it.
Well, I think you're an incredible ambassador for the creative arts and for what is to be a next generation, I think, of opportunity for young people to think about ways in which they can take a paintbrush of any kind and paint on a canvas that's new and interesting and mysterious,
Mm.
and that being the ocean and conservation efforts. Where can people learn more about your work, and also potentially to partake in a planetarium and a show where we put space to the side for a moment and we talk about a new frontier?
Thank you, Rod. The best place for everyone to check out our work is at soundsoftheocean.com, which has links both to my contact info, our company information, and most importantly, a list of upcoming performances and film screenings. So please do check us out, soundsoftheocean.com, also on all the social media channels with the same name, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. So look forward to hear from you.
Well, and I will see you in Sounds of the Ocean as I'm writing my next article. I'll be listening to your work. Thanks so much, Joshua.
Thank you so much, Rod.
Thanks for taking the plunge into HeadRoom, where we uncover the why behind the what and who impacting our lives. HeadRoom is a production of Rainlight and co-produced by our friends at Old Soul. I'm your host, Dr. Rod Berger, and this is HeadRoom.